Okay, try it now, Reiko.
Oh, okay. How about now? Am I audible to chat?
I think you are. It was a little too loud, but I've adjusted that now. It should be better.
I can also whisper if that would help.
I don't think that's necessary, but I appreciate your flexibility. Yeah. Would you care to introduce yourself to the chat real quick for anybody who doesn't know the great and powerful Reikadactylus?
Hello, Paleontologizing's community. I legally, my name is Emilio Lobato, Dr. Emilio Lobato. I have a PhD in cognitive science that I got from the University of California, Merced. On Twitch, I am at twitch.tv/Racco_Dactylus, where I do a lot of gaming, but also weekly science communication streams where I talk about the science of why people believe weird things. That's specifically what I got my PhD in. And you know, this is a topic that connects to why people believe some very, very ugly, weird things about each other, about women, about like all sorts of groups that are marginalized, oppressed, gate kept out of the scientific community. So I have to confront this kind of stuff head on, as
Right.
I think all of us in the scientific community have a duty to do, and which you absolutely are doing, and quite a number of our colleagues are taking up this sort of very important task of reflecting on what these kinds of news stories tell us about the scientific community and what we can do better.
Right. Well said. I want to make it clear that this isn't just paleontologists who are in the Epstein files. There's a lot of other researchers and a lot of other fields too. Is there How have you been grappling with that? Because I'm sure there are people in psychology, maybe cognitive science too,
Oh
sociology.
God, yeah, yeah. I mean, people I've cited before,
Shoot.
people I've met personally.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's every field. There is not a field that did not have a and I'm not even just say like a member of the scientific community, a
Right.
prominent leading institutional figure.
Right.
Biology has had several, linguistics has had several,
Right.
psychology,
Yeah.
cognitive science, anthropology, physics. All of us have, and the two things that all these people have in common is that they are white and they are men. So this is a really important and I do worry under discussed aspect of the Epstein connection to the scientific community is that it was it was specifically a very particular demographic that just sort of always seems to be at the center of a lot of these things. Very financially well off white guys.
Yep. Yeah. And
And that creates conditions that gatekeep out everyone else essentially.
right. Yeah. It's not fun to talk about this sort of thing because there's so
Yeah.
many different parts of there's so many unpleasant things that all kind of dovetail here. One of them is just the lack of public funding of science in this country that could
Yeah.
make fertile ground for having a billionaire creep be able to like dangle money in front of people, but I almost feel like that's kind of overemphasized.
Yeah.
What do you think, Reiko?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to find it because I did. Like I said a few weeks ago on one of my SciComm streams, it was specific about this, and there was an
Mm-hmm.
article. Yeah, I found it here. It is. I'm gonna throw it in your chat real quick.
Okay,
It's
nice.
was published in Scientific American,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I don't want to throw smoke at the journalist here, but I do think that the framing is kind of like you said. It's overemphasizing the importance of the funding component.
Right.
Uh, in a way that incidentally gives a lot of cover to the linguist and psychologist Steven Pinker's association with Epstein, but that's sort of a separate issue.
Mm-hmm.
But in this article, they cite other researchers who are quoted, and sort of down in the middle, a science communication expert at Cornell says scientists need patronage, they need support. That's not good or bad. That's what it is. And that's been true for 400 years. And I think that's a very common view among scientists. And I disagree. I
Right.
think it's bad that the history of science for over 400 years has been disproportionately dominated by individual wealthy patrons or individual wealthy organizations
Right.
rather than public funding from governments and nations and the general public to have that sort of skin in the game for caring about science and having that interest. I think that's actually been a bad thing, but like you said, I think that's been overemphasized as well. This is just one sociopathic billionaire, but all the rest are not problematic. It's weird.
It is weird. Yeah, there was a an article recently. Let me see if I can find this. Uh, by Chris Hedges, I think it was.
Mm.
You probably saw this too, Reiko. I'll provide a link here in the page not found. Okay, hang on.
I'm familiar with that website.
Yeah. Here it is right here. But this is somebody who, he's a journalist and he was a big admirer of Noam Chomsky, as I think a lot of us were, until he showed up really prominently in a lot of these files. And it turns out he was
Yeah.
Noam Chomsky is alleged to have been like actively trying to repair Jeffrey Epstein's image even after
Yeah.
his the trial and the conviction and everything else, like up until just before Jeffrey Epstein died, so like really indefensible. um this piece I think really hit hard because here's this journalist that I have a lot of respect for, and he's kind of grappling with this.
Yeah.
He says at the end,
Oh, I think you may have put the wrong link in chat because that's a link to
oh
um
shoot,
the
yeah,
Twitch
never mind.
dashboard for us.
Hang on a second, it didn't copy properly. Would a
Yeah.
mod mind deleting that earlier?
Can we delete your comments?
I think so. Yeah. Here, go for it, Claire. Somebody can. Um, I think so. I should be able to, right? Uh, maybe if I ban myself, it'll get rid of all my messages. We'll
Yeah,
see.
I don't even think the head mod, if you've given that to anybody, I don't even think they can delete broadcaster comments.
No, I haven't done the head mod thing. It just seems like a recipe for
Yeah.
trouble. Um,
Oh yeah, because we're all vying for control of being the number one mod.
I mean, in a lot of other people's communities, I think that would be, uh, it would be a serious issue. But yeah, I don't think I can delete my
Yeah.
own.
I
Anyway,
I think you might be able to if you go to your chat settings and you enable your moderator icons and
I'm
mod
not going to worry
actions.
about
You
it
might
right
be able.
now. I'm just going to flood it with
Fair enough.
emotes,
Yeah.
and
There you go.
let's just get rid of that. There we go. Yeah. Uh,
That works.
Anyhow, so Chris Hedges writes in this article, Noam Chomsky was not fooled by Epstein. He was seduced. His
Mm-hmm.
association with Epstein is a terrible and, to many, unforgivable stain. It irreparably tarnishes his legacy. If there is a lesson here, it is this: the ruling class offers nothing without expecting something in return. The closer you get to these vampires, the more you become enslaved. Our role is not to socialize with them, it is to destroy them. Those are strong words, but I agree with the sentiment overall.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we as scientists should be above this kind of thing. Like, we shouldn't be part of this milieu in the first place. And I know it can be difficult to get funding. I know that it's tough sometimes, but you have to draw a line somewhere. And it's really disappointing, like disturbing to see that a lot of prominent voices in academia and in the sciences, they didn't have that kind of integrity, you know?
Yeah. There's I mean, there is a lot to be said about the culture of the scientific community here, in a sense that like we really have been cloistered monastic orders essentially that we shouldn't be concerned with the affairs of the rabble in our noble unending quest for the truth. And it's like when this kind of stuff comes to light, you realize no, actually the scientific community needs to be a part of society and not
Right.
apart from it. We are
Yep.
not above the rest of this stuff. Scientists are people too. we still need to go to restaurants, which means that we are deeply interconnected to the food service industry and the and
Sure.
agricultural community. We drive cars, so we are connected to the automotive industry and the oil and petroleum industry. We are voters, we are taxpayers, we are intimately connected to the political structure.
Yep.
Scientists are people, so let's actually embrace our humanity rather than pretend that we can cloister some of it off so that we can just mess around with our data sheets and publish our papers in peace. And I think we've been at a bit of a turn over maybe a couple decades now where more scientists are starting to acknowledge that aspect of what it means to be in the scientific community. But we're still fighting against several centuries of entrenched ideology that is science is this dispassionate, objective, whatever it is. And it's like, nah, man, I know you people. We go drinking at the same bars. We're not dispassionate, objective observers. We are passionate subjects who are trying desperately to answer questions that we just can't let go. And that's what makes all of this exciting. Why would we not embrace that and pretend that we're something that we're not?
Right. And I want to make it clear that I wasn't trying to say that scientists should be dispassionate Vulcans or
Oh, no, I
something
didn't
like that,
think
or
you
that
were.
should
Yeah.
we should be completely above the like what I'm doing here on Twitch obviously is like trying to do science outreach and make it interactive and just
Mhm.
talk to folks where they are. I don't think I'm better than
Oh,
anybody
yeah.
else.
No,
That's
I
not,
I I didn't mean
yeah.
to
And I
imply that
I'm
you
not
had
saying that you
said
were,
anything
yeah.
wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. But I just want to make
But
that
this is
really
actually
clear for
part
anybody
of
watching.
some research papers that I've been working on for a few years with one of my doctoral advisors in this. Like the topic that you might, anybody interested would want to look up is the concept of science adhering to the value free ideal.
Mm.
Versus the value laden turn in science. And we were actually publishing on sort of the public's views on values in science and
Does the
how
current
these
project ever
manifest
just?
in things like people's expressed beliefs or how they do things like comment on proposed rule changes to things like the EPA. Because I know that you've absolutely modeled some of that behavior, like when the Endangered Species Act, those proposed rule changes, like you've shown on stream, like how can the public get involved and how can you expect? So, and your stream is a really good example of how the public is very interested in science and scientists are very interested in the public being very interested in science and that cool, we need to do more of that and embrace more of that. But within the old guard, within the ivory towers, within these monastic cloisters, there are still a lot of our colleagues, people we've studied under, people we cite, people we look up to, who do still kind of have that dispassionate, detached from society view of what science should be.
Right.
And that's what I was critiquing, not anything you've said.
Yeah, and I
Yeah, yeah,
didn't think that you were. I was just trying to make that
yeah.
clear to anybody watching because I don't know, it is an interesting balance to try and strike where, like Gal Rock says in the chat, I think Danny might be telling us that he's not neutral about dinosaurs. He actually loves them. I mean, I do. I'm very passionate about what I do, and I hope that's apparent in every stream that we do here. But
Mhm.
at the same time, we as scientists, like, there is an ideal that we're trying to uphold where we're supposed to be following the evidence where it leads. Science is supposed to be I don't know if more objective is the right word, but a more organized and systematic way of knowing where we're actively testing ideas
Mhm.
and all of this. And it's
So there's a sociologist of science and historian of science from way long ago, Robert K. Merton, and you might have
uh-huh,
heard me talk about this before. You may have come across this before.
uh-huh,
He is most famous for talking about these norms of the scientific community in terms of our sort of organizational structure and behavior. These have become known as the Mertonian norms, and these are very
right, okay,
aspirational.
yeah,
But these are norms like now this was done in the 1930s and 40s, so the word that he used is communism, but because that has such a very particular political inclination these days, we typically refer to it now as communalism,
yep,
which is this idea that science is for everyone and that we as individual scientists have no right to gatekeep knowledge. We
right,
are entitled to the credit for what we have discovered. or invented or progressed in the field, but we are not entitled to hoard knowledge. Another norm is universalism, this idea that
Hmm.
science is for everyone to participate in, and the only requirements be that you have well-formed ideas that you can defend, and you sort of adhere to the standards and norms of the particular research methods that your projects and disciplines endorse, rather
Hmm.
than do things like everybody's opinion is equal. It's more like, well, as long as you agree that this is how you use the Bunsen burner and the beaker and the hot plate and all that, like, then you can be at the table of science.
Hmm.
um, Another of these norms is called disinterestedness, which is not Merton arguing that the aspirational norm of science is that we don't have passions,
Yeah, like we're bored or something. Yeah.
but we allow ourselves to temper our passions and be guided by the evidence.
Right.
And then the final Mertonian norm is organized skepticism, this awareness that what we do as scientists is not individual. We
Hmm.
are a community, and we have to operate at the level of organizational skepticism, which is not the same as denialism or cynicism.
Right.
Skepticism facilitates belief, it's not the denial of belief. Um, and these Mertonian norms are, they're not how we are, they're what we aspire to, and we hopefully try to incrementally get closer with each new generation of research methods, each new generation of new norms and policies for how to train scientists, how to teach, how to publish, how to communicate, and so on. But Weirdly enough, in a lot of training for a lot of scientists, we don't get a lot of explicit instruction on these norms and values of science,
Oh.
Merton's or anyone else's. A lot of times it's part of the hidden curriculum, stuff that we
Hmm.
implicitly get but don't know how to explicitly talk about.
Right. Yeah.
um, and that's part of why a lot of us are struggling with this, is because what Epstein's associations with the scientific community reveal are these fractures between what a lot of us have picked up about how we should be operating and the reality of how an uncomfortable number of us do act in the scientific community, and we're trying to reconcile that dissonance.
That is something that I've been continually surprised by over the past, I don't know, decade or so. It's just how few of my colleagues seem to really know or care much about philosophy of science. It's just this idea that, like, hey, there's this enterprise that we're all part of, and you call it like a hidden curriculum almost, where like
Mhm.
here's the stuff that we all, it's supposed to be there in the background and we're supposed to know it, but very few people are able to actually explicitly state these ideals or what, or even be able to define what science is, um beyond like a fifth grade science fair, hypothesis, experiment, conclusion sort of thing. um
Yes, but that does lead to some very, very funny moments, and I know that you've talked about this on stream before in the Kitzmiller versus Dover case,
oh
where
yeah.
Michael Behe on the stand was forced to acknowledge that with his definitions of science, not only would creationism count as science, but so would astrology.
Exactly, yeah,
And
yeah.
uh, so the lack of scientist, because Michael B, he is a scientist, he's just not a good one, and he's also a pseudoscientist, he's got a
Yep.
PhD and all that. So the lack of philosophy of science interest among the scientific community has led to at least some comedy,
For sure,
um
yeah.
in that, so I'll give it that at least.
Uh-huh. It's nice that it can be highlighted with stuff like yeah, but now it's being highlighted in a very different kind of way that's not as nearly as, it's not
Mhm.
funny.
Yeah.
Not to bring down the mood too much, but what do you feel has been the primary reaction that you've seen at sort of different tiers, different, like, much of academia is kind of hierarchical.
Hmm.
Um, do you feel like you've seen different reactions to the whole Epstein science thing from sort of different academic hierarchical tiers here? Academic deans versus
Yes.
adjunct researchers,
Yeah.
everything in between.
Yeah, so I've seen and I do want to be a little circumspect talking about this, but I
Sure.
have seen
Yeah.
that those who tend to be higher up on the administrative side of academia, to be clear with Chad about this, administrators in academia have PhDs in academic disciplines. A lot of them are scientists. They're in the humanities. They're PhDs in psychology, economics, history. It's all like so. Academic administrators are within the scientific community as well. They're tending to be a little bit more guarded about what they say, in part because their position might then, one, be mistaken as a statement on behalf of the organization that they're administrator for, and they have to be very careful about that.
Right.
Um, but also, they have this additional burden as being an administrator of keeping the doors open for the university, which means trying to step on as few toes as possible, um, which includes stepping on the toes of private funders, uh,
Right.
as
Yeah.
well as to politicians who, for public universities, control the purse strings to a large degree.
Hmm.
So they're being a little bit more circumspect, that I've noticed. But then there are also news stories of some administrators at places who are still trying to defend their associations with Epstein as
Hmm.
a result of how much money he gave those universities.
Right.
Um, and there are additional universities that have, in the past few years, not just recently, but in the past few years, given back, so to speak, or like donated some amount of money commensurate with the amount that they received from Epstein to nonprofit organizations as this attempt to sort of manage their reputation and apologize. But
Interesting. I haven't seen
that's
that
been
yet.
very
That's
few.
yeah, yeah.
The Santa Fe Institute did that a number of years
Okay.
ago. I think in
In New
2019
Mexico?
or 2020. They had received, I think, I'm gonna get the number wrong. Over $100,000 they received from Epstein
Mm.
after I think he died.
Uh-huh.
And more news stories broke about it. I think that I've got the timing of this. They ended up donating a chunk of that amount of money to local nonprofits and things like that.
Hmm.
So that is one example, but that was also years ago. There are other organizations that have likewise tried to do damage control in a variety of ways.
Hmm.
But then, yeah, lower down the academic hierarchy and totem pole, you are seeing a range of responses, and those range of responses also intersect with the demographics of the individuals. A fair number of women academics and women scientists are either just sort of saying, yeah, this is the culture of academia. Epstein's not anything particularly special, um, all the way to incredulously sort of asking, is there any evidence in these communications that have been released about Epstein of any men standing up to Epstein
Right.
and saying no or condemning him or anything like that, with
Hmm.
not a lot of amazement when it's sort of responded with, there's almost no real condemnation in these files from
Right.
anyone. Um, and among a lot of men, academics, you have a much more diverse array of responses that range from "we had no idea" all the way up to "yeah, no, we know this was going on because we, it turns out, listen to women and take them sharing their experiences kind of seriously, and we've also kind of known that things are like this."
Hmm.
And there have also been responses from academics of color, scientists of color, particularly black scientists and so on, going, hey, anybody else noticing that all these academics that Epstein is buddy buddy with are white? Isn't that kind of interesting? Even though there are also, black academics who also have these kinds of misogynistic proclivities. Isn't it also interesting that there's this racialized component to all of this? Should we talk about that? So we are
Right.
seeing a variety of responses that do intersect with people's positionality and demographics. Um, Nobody knows really what to do except
Right.
at this point to condemn it all.
Hmm.
And we're all just, I say we like I'm still in academia and not a Twitch streamer, but academics are also just like my understanding is they're trying to figure out ways that they can work within the systems to make things better. But I'm gonna quote the I'm going to quote Audre Lorde and say that, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. But I'm also saying that from somebody outside the master's house. So
I mean, you still
take what I
publish
say
and
with a
you're
grain
you're
of
still
salt.
doing active research. Like it's, you're
Yeah.
not completely
So are
outside of
you.
academia. Yeah, yeah, and I don't know. It's weird being like in this kind of limbo outside.
Mm,
So I never quite know
yeah.
how to, what terminology to use. But anyway, I also want to point that we got a big raid from Casey Snowart. Thank you, Casey. Sorry you dropped in at a time when we're talking about such a dire topic, but it's important, which is why
Nine.
we're discussing this.
Yeah.
Like as
That
as
means I'm in
members
here
of.
twice now because I was lurking in Casey's stream.
Oh, you were.
Yeah. So let me close the
Nice.
tab. There we go.
Double rake out. Yeah, yeah. But anyway, for anybody just joining us, we got into the whole like Jeffrey Epstein and science topic because, well, this really exciting new Spinosaur paper that just came out on Thursday. Uh, I was going over that right as soon as it came out. It dropped just before I started my stream, and then I saw that the third author on the paper is a guy, former Microsoft executive. He's mentioned very, very prominently in the, well, very, very prominently, a bunch of times in the Epstein files, and again, it's hard to find the words to describe this sort of thing. Um, None of the press coverage about the Spinosaurus discovery talks about this at all, and I feel like it's worth discussing. So we've got Rhacodactylus here, who's a cognitive scientist and is somebody I respect tremendously. He can speak on these topics with much greater know-how than I can. So this almost feels like a bit of a crutch, but Reiko, it's wonderful to have your input here. And yeah, I what I want to ask is, as researchers, when we're dealing with something like this, when you have a colleague who is possibly implicated in this sort of thing, what do you need to think about when we're talking about maybe citing their papers or not, bringing them onto a project, kicking them off of a project? Like, there's no playbook for this kind of thing, is there? I mean, it's these
Um,
are difficult decisions to make, and like, what should be the things that we're thinking about when we're trying to make decisions about whether to work with certain people or not work with certain people? That's a broad question, but
yeah. I mean, yeah. There is no playbook, but we all do. I mean, we all have our moral standards, whatever they may be, and we have to make these decisions. In terms of choosing to work with somebody, I think that's an easy choice. If you
right.
know that somebody has a reputation for fostering or enabling a toxic environment and harassment, discriminatory behavior, whatever, and you choose to work with them regardless because they're a prominent name or whatever, you are you are basically throwing a group of people under the bus for your personal benefit, and you've made that choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hope that anybody who does that eventually learns to not make that choice. If you're already working with people like that and it comes out during the course of that,
Mm-hmm.
i- it is also going to kind of depend on the nature of the work you're doing with them. If you happen to be co-PIs on an NSF grant, well, now there are legal contractual obligations because that is a legal financial contract,
Yeah.
and you have to navigate that and consult with legal experts about what you can do, and consult with the grant funding sponsor to see if adjustments can be made, even if the adjustment that's made is you bow out because you can't morally compel yourself to continue to work with somebody like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's also, a related issue of how do faculty at a university, even though the scientists also work in private industry, but I'm going to talk about the university setting. How do faculty steer students who have similar research interests to a problematic faculty member? How do they protect the students and maybe steer them to a different faculty mentor or to a different lab?
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are a lot of things that people do, and a lot of it does kind of have to be kept rather personal and quiet and in the so-called whisper network, um, which some people may be familiar with as a term. But it's done this way because institutions, all institutions, exist to protect the institution. They don't exist to protect you. HR never works to protect you, the worker. It works to protect
Right.
the institution. That's true. That's just as true at McDonald's as it is at University of blah blah blah.
Sure.
HR is not there for you. It's there for the company.
Hmm.
And if you start to become troublesome, particularly to a well-funded researcher, because you are opposing their, treatment of women, treatment of racial minorities, treatment of students with disabilities, whatever. Well, the institution is going to protect the source of income because that source of income that researcher gets from private donors helps keep the door open. Like I said, they're in the unenviable position of trying to satisfy a lot of different demands, and they often end up sacrificing people for the institution rather than the other way around. Um, People are just sort of guided by their individual morality, which isn't great because a lot of times when push comes to shove, people do quiet down. And we've seen this historically in academic context as well. The
Yep.
most pronounced example in my mind, it's not necessarily the most egregious one out there, but when Mussolini's fascist regime took over Italy, and then started implementing policies to require the university system to expel Jewish faculty and Jewish students, fewer than 1% of faculty spoke out against it. And there are, like, academics are people,
Yeah.
and sometimes people suck
Yeah.
because all of us are sometimes put in impossible moral dilemma and we freeze or we somehow justify our continued comfort or benefit as an avenue to potentially lead to greater long-term benefit down the line instead of taking a very uncomfortable stance now, incurring that penalty now in the hopes that that leads to a better tomorrow that way. And
Right. And I mean,
yeah.
on some level, it's almost easy for us to say, being peripheral to academia. We're here on Twitch, and
Mhm.
we're not hopefully going to get fired from this for speaking out. But I mean,
Well, I have not been fired, but
uh huh.
I was in this situation. Um, and I've spoken about this before. The first PhD program I was a part of,
Mm-hmm.
it came out that one of the graduate students in the department committed an act of sexual violence against another graduate student in the department I was a part of. And he was a graduate student of the faculty member who received the most research grants in the institution,
Mm-hmm.
which really helped fund the department and the programs and all that other stuff. The institution decided to slap on the wrist to the aggressor.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the victim tried to assert her right to basically be protected from him, they were not responsive in a way that ended up causing her to drop out, basically being pressured to drop out.
Uh-huh.
And as all this was going on, I'm sitting there watching, and I'm in a psychology department. There actually are faculty whose specific areas of expertise are things like sexism and sexual harassment in the workplace.
Right.
And I'm
Yeah.
seeing all of these people beholden to the institution. And I decided I can't actually learn how to be a good scientist here because you all are not modeling good scientific behavior. And I wrote what has to be the nastiest email I've ever written in my life. I sent it to the department chair and the program chair saying, I'm out.
Uh-huh.
And thankfully, I got into another PhD program the following year and was able
Right.
to then attend UC Merced and get my PhD there. But um,
That
when
took
I
real
had
guts. I mean, shoot,
when I had
that's not.
announced that to other grad students,
Yeah.
they were all amazed. Like the first year students, because I was a first year, my fellow first year cohort members were amazed that anybody would do that because they were just relieved to get in anywhere.
Right.
And they didn't want to risk being on the market again, even though I was saying, look, if you got into one PhD program, you're good enough to get into another.
Mm-hmm.
The fifth years, the people who were at the end of their dissertation were just like, I'm almost out of here. I can't do that.
Right.
Oh, it's real brave what
Risk
you're doing. It's
starting
just like,
over somewhere else. Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
like, I get it. It's tough, but like,
Yeah.
you'd be starting over showing a greater commitment to this more moral position that you claim to have.
Right.
And everybody was sort of, oh, I can't do this, all this other stuff. And meanwhile, I'm just going like, yeah, my future's uncertain, but like my present is not. My
Right.
present self is not uncertain about how I feel about how we've basically done wrong, a victim of violence.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't be a party of that. There's nothing I'm going to do from within this institution to change it or fix it. I'll go elsewhere. My leaving is how I'm going to change your institution. No idea
Right.
if they ever did. Separate
Yeah.
conversation,
Right.
but I have actually met a number of academics who have done comparable things in similar situations from the position of either directly involved or from the same kind of thing I was in, observing it,
Mm-hmm.
and being disgusted by it. And it does kind of suck that like it is so few people who stand by their principles.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
I remember the comedian Jon Stewart when he was hosting the Daily Show, and this was maybe 15, 20 years ago. I can't remember what the topic was on, but a quote of his was in my mind, was that if you pick up and put down your morals the way you put on and take off a coat, they're not morals.
Right.
Um,
It's just an
it's
act.
not the
Yeah.
quote; it's a paraphrase.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was
Yeah.
he was on one of his infamous moralizing rants, and there was a good line in there about how like they're only your morals if you're actually sort of having to struggle with them, rather
Right.
than something that you just adopt for the sake of convenience and so on.
Exactly. I've
And
heard it said before that like that's why we admire people who have principles, because
yeah,
having principles means that you're actually sacrificing something for a belief that you have. Like if you're not sacrificing anything, then they're not real principles, you know?
yeah, yeah. And that, I mean, this was before I was I think this was before I even finished my undergraduate, but that was a line that has clearly stuck with me for so
Yeah.
long that I was just like, yeah, no, we need more people to say that. And then we also need more people to live up to that. And then I remember some words from one of my undergraduate mentors, in a completely different context that was not about moralism or moralizing in any way. It was just a simple quote of, if not you, who? And if not now, when? He was quoting a
Right.
much, older aphorism kind of thing. And then when push comes to shove, I try to remember that. And I don't want to pretend that I'm a good guy on all this all the time. I have dropped the ball morally with dilemmas all the time, but it is interesting that when it comes to the scientific community writ large or the academic community writ larger, because it's also philosophers and engineers who are in the Epstein files too,
Oh yeah.
you know, what does it say about us that collectively so many of us drop the same ball
Mm-hmm.
time and time again when it comes to the treatment of women, and with regard to Epstein, the treatment of women and girls?
Right.
We
I
got to do
think that's
better.
exactly, yeah. One of the things that I think is particularly disturbing about this is that maybe it's a sample bias thing. Maybe we're only hearing about the most prominent names, but it seems like Epstein did kind of seek out some of the most prominent people in academia. And these are generally people who are pretty well connected to start with. It's not like they're, having to do crowdfunding campaigns to fund their research. It's not like these are people who are necessarily particularly hard up for cash or anything. Um it's like these are people who could have found money elsewhere in a lot of these cases. Um it seems like a hierarchical thing. Like, if you're a particularly prominent researcher, then these are the circles that you're supposed to run in, you know? It's the impression that I get from all of this. Um how much do you think like prestige and reputation and like maybe a feeling of entitlement, like, oh well, look at me, I'm a very accomplished researcher, so I deserve to be here, maybe doing really scummy like, how much do you think that plays a role here, this idea of like hierarchy, prestige, reputation?
Yeah. Um, oh god, yeah, it plays a huge role. Y- all of us do things that we think we either are entitled to do or think we can get away with. And that doesn't have to be like scummy or anything. Like,
Hmm.
I go to the store and I buy pasta because I think I'm entitled to have pasta for dinner. Like,
Sure.
like that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Everything we do, we think we are
Yeah.
entitled to do it. And there are a number of things that we don't do that we also think we're entitled to. And sometimes that's a difficulty of access or opportunity to do it. I'd like to own my own home. I think I'm entitled to home ownership, but like I can't do that right now.
Hmm.
But that also does include some things that people think that they're entitled to do, but they know others would disapprove of. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
I'd love to drive 100 miles on the freeway because it would make me get to LA faster, or, whatever, to get to to get to Fresno faster to get to the airport. But like I'm not gonna do it because there's a societal stigma against driving 100 miles on the free. I mean, maybe not here in
Yeah.
California, where goodness gracious, people on the highway
On the five. Holy
seem
cow.
to
Yeah.
think that the only speed
Yeah.
limit is E. Just my goodness.
Speed
Um,
of light. Yeah.
but
Uh,
yeah, but like we also inhibit things we would like to do because there's that social disapproval. And we do kind of see when it comes to this type of behavior, discriminatory or prejudicial behavior in hiring or admissions or the treatment of our colleagues or our students, we do see this sense of entitlement in these perpetrators that they have every right to do that. In the Epstein files, there are communications with faculty members where they are talking about how they do not think that women have the biological capacity to be scientists, to contribute. And these are scientists who also serve on hiring committees, serve on graduate student admissions committees. How
right.
many women have been kept out of these institutions because one or more men in the department felt that, well, let's not take our chance on a woman because biology. Like how much creativity have we lost basically gatekeeping these people out because these
Right.
men feel entitled to have a male dominated environment or a white dominated environment or whatever it is. um so they have this entitlement in part because our broader society has always had this fascination with this hierarchical organization. Who are the superiors? Who are the inferiors?
Hmm.
And if you are a superior discoverer of knowledge or inventor of knowledge, I'm going to include both of us in here because we discover knowledge. We do have a high degree of social prestige. Scientists are
Yeah.
a very well respected member of society.
Yep.
And I think some of us forget that we have to earn that and
Right.
not that we're entitled to that.
Yep.
And that's where I think some problems arise is straight up a sense of entitlement to that prestige, and they enforce that by gatekeeping out everyone else.
Hmm.
And
Well said. Yeah.
it it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I wonder if you have any thoughts on how we can get out of this. How can we prevent this sort of thing from happening in the future? Maybe this is getting into stuff that's a little too utopian, but let's be lofty about this. Like, how should we
uh
as academics, as scientists, as researchers fight against this kind of culture? You know?
um I for TOS reasons, I will not say what my immediate thought was
Redacted.
regarding
Yeah,
our
fair.
treatment of billionaires.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
you know, I do think that some of the things that we can adopt are relatively small scale,
Hmm.
and relatively simple changes. And I will point to field sciences as an example of a slight change to the culture. No alcohol on field sites.
Hmm.
At camp, said anything like that, because that the presence of alcohol creates an environment that is more threatening to sex and gender minorities and sexual and people who are in minority sexual orientations,
Hmm.
because there are members of those majority groups who you get a little of that inhibition removing kinds of substances, who then start to say things they shouldn't say, do things they shouldn't do, and that dissuades more people from those minority groups from participating in those disciplines that do a lot of field work.
Hmm.
So a simple thing like that
Sure.
can have a positive impact on the inclusivity of those types of research activities. Um,
And I can
but
see
there,
how people would push back against that idea too.
oh
Like
yeah,
it
absolutely.
and geology and paleontology, like
Mhm.
holy cow, telling people they can't have, beer on the
Yeah,
campfire, that's people would be angry. Like totally see
yeah.
where you're coming from with this. And yeah, that'd be a big ask for a lot of people, but
Oh yeah.
um it is a solution. Like it that would be
But
a positive, like I don't think you could argue that that's
yeah.
not really a positive change.
But let's reflect
Yeah.
on what we both acknowledge there. That is a huge ask for a lot of researchers. So if
Hmm.
that little thing, let's not have beer and wine
Yep.
around the campfire when we are 100 miles from the nearest town doing our
Hmm.
soil sample research or our archaeological research, how much harder would it be to implement any other sort of
Right.
systematic change to things like hiring practices, payment practices? Because a lot of universities in the United States are public universities; they are government institutions. So the salary information of everybody who works there is public knowledge.
Yep.
So anybody who's interested can look up their local community college or their local four-year university and see that on average the women academics are still making less than the men academics.
Yep.
Same position, same job titles, same amount of tenure, same years of experience, same everything. The women are still making less. So how much if it would be, because it really would be a lot of ask to change the culture of these field sciences to just be like no beer around the campfire.
Hmm.
What then if it's like, well, now the universities have to pay the women equal to men, or they have to actually engage in hiring practices that are shown to be more egalitarian, you know?
Hmm.
Now you're not just involving people's individual day-to-day, like, well, here's how I do my research out in the field and I relax with, the relaxing juice around the campfire. It's now just like, here's my day-to-day life at the university where all those students don't read the syllabus and I'm stressed out because 16 deans want me to serve on 28 committees. And now
Yeah.
I also have to care about this other stuff. Um, so, if even the small changes are big asks, the big changes are even bigger asks.
That's a good
And
point. Yeah.
I wish I actually had any real solutions for this, but I will, rather than pretend that I have anything to say, I will instead cite several women who have plenty of things to say about this. Hold on one second.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about what you said too. So I'm just trying to fill dead air at this point. But like, if it's, I say that's a big request to make of people to like not have alcohol in the field. But if that's what it takes to allow certain people to be able to participate in field work and help them be safe out there, then that seems like a low bar, you know?
So I got this book a while back. It is titled Equity in Science. It is by Julie Passelt. The subtitle is Representation, Culture, and the Dynamics of Change in Graduate Education.
Hmm.
I would highly recommend this to anybody who is interested in learning a little bit more about these types of issues. But
Mm-hmm.
also, she does write about positive examples, some of which that have been going on for decades now, where like the applied physics program at, oh, I'm gonna forget the institution. Is it Michigan? Oh, there's an applied physics program in the United States that by itself is responsible for over 20% of all black physicist PhDs, um, which is pretty ridiculous. But it's
Jeez.
because they oriented around catering to the students and
Uh-huh.
and catering, attending to these issues of egalitarianism, equal opportunity, um, reorientation of curricula to foster that type of environment.
Mm-hmm.
So she does have in there examples of people who've just like, yeah, there is no playbook for this, so I'm just going to invent my playbook for this and let's go for it.
Hmm.
Um, so that's a good one. There's also a book. I don't have a physical copy of it, but it's called "On the Wrong Side," and this is now a book that does deal with how universities protect abusers and perpetrators of sexual harassment and sexual violence and end up failing their victims.
Hmm.
And she ends up talking about how frequently at universities, Title IX offices are deliberately underfunded and understaffed in order to be inefficient at fulfilling their purpose on colleges and universities.
Right. And it becomes a
And she talks
self-fulfilling
about,
prophecy where the point where
yeah,
like, oh, well, they're not doing quality work anyway because they're underfunded. We might as well
mhm,
just get rid of the whole enterprise. Like,
yeah.
just cut out Title IX. Yeah.
Yeah, and she talks about a lot of anecdotes of how this affects people from every demographic because while we do correctly talk about sexual violence, sexual harassment as a heavily gendered issue,
Hmm.
anyone can be the target
Oh yeah.
of it. And one of her chapters opens with a story of a white man who became a victim of domestic abuse, and the university completely and utterly failed him as well, failed to protect him and his children while they were living in student housing and things like that. And there are tons of people who acknowledge that these are systemic issues that have been around for longer than Jeffrey Epstein has been in the
Hmm.
conversation. Um, and I want to point to them to be people who have data and experience and a perspective that is worth listening to for where solutions may lie.
Hmm.
And I also want to cite the uh, theoretical physicist, I think she is, but she's also a YouTube science streamer, science communication,
Oh, is this
science popularizer.
Angela
Uh,
Collier?
Angela Collier. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
A few years ago, when she got started, one of her first videos was on the prevalence of sexual harassment by prominent men in physics.
Hmm.
And in addition to detailing, a lot of the accusations levied at prominent men, she does end with just thoughtful suggestions for how the scientific community could deal with this. And one
Right.
thought that she had that I have thought about is, well, we don't have to cite these people anymore because they're not the only ones working on these issues, but also like there's nothing to stop us as a scientific community from just synthesizing their contributions to science with everybody else's, and then those become the primary articles that everybody cites a million times instead of the
Hmm.
first the discovery made by this person and instead. And I like that because in our profession as scientists, citations are a currency,
Hmm. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
we
Yeah.
can selectively deprive bad actors of that little bit of currency. And
Hmm.
why don't we do that?
Yeah. I feel like that already does happen a lot in paleontology with um, people who are have a reputation for being, uh, shall we say, less than socially minded about things.
Yeah.
Um, but you make a good point in that we are already making choices about who to cite and who not to. You can't cite everybody. You can't have you know, your citations list be 40 pages long. So we're already making value judgments there to a certain extent. But yeah, I do know people who would really rankle at the idea of not citing somebody because, you think they're a jerk or because they, have been like an active abuser or harasser or somebody like that. But again, we have to draw the line somewhere. So I
Yeah,
guess it becomes
I've
like a
encountered
personal
people
moral
like
choice
that
there.
too.
Yeah, yeah.
And my response to that, when I've had colleagues or friends who've made that argument, which is very, very similar to like you can't separate the art from the artist when it comes out like an actor or an athlete or
Sure.
whatever.
Hmm.
Um, my response to that has I can't remember where I even got this from, but it's been this: do you really think that their research is completely unaffected by how they treat everyone that they work with?
Hmm.
They're students who are in like my field doing a lot of the data collection, or
Mm-hmm.
running the research participants? Do you really think that their research is completely and totally unaffected by how they treat their colleagues?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not like we're at a lack of instances of men, for example, stealing the credit of women or
Right.
leaving women's names off of papers that they substantially contributed to. I mean, most famously is Watson and Crick leaving off Rosalind
Rosalind
Franklin
Franklin.
for
Yeah.
discovery of the double helical structure of DNA. And then I believe it was Watson. Maybe Crick also did this, but Watson, who ended up, they shared a Nobel Prize for this. He used his clout and privilege to steer the Nobel Committee away from recognizing other, accomplished women in the field.
Right.
Um, so, do you really think that their research is not affected by the way they treat people? And if we continue to cite those people, we're not just rewarding their academic work, we're rewarding their academic work and how they treat their colleagues and students and funders and their peers and everything. And we have to think about that. And I'm not going to pretend to be, completely pure in this. I still have to make these decisions too, and I still sometimes cite people who I don't necessarily think are the best representatives of the
Sometimes
field.
you have to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes there's no
Um,
way
s
around it, and yeah. Yeah. Um,
yeah.
this is. I really appreciate being able to talk to you about this, Reiko. This is especially such a spur of the moment thing. Thank you for suggesting this. Um, I wonder
Well,
if you have any
I
advice
wanna I
for.
wanna I
Yeah.
wanna, I wanna ask you this as well, because, specifically in the field of paleontology, and I guess specifically in your contacts who are or across the paleontology sort of domain, not just at in conferences like SVP, but just sort of across, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm all right. The jokey question is, why did you people of all people think that you could keep things, from being dug up? But less jokingly, um, what does paleontology? What's the range of paleontologists' response to this? Because I know that SVP has put out a statement, and
Mm-hmm.
they have also you sort of ended their statement by saying that they are receiving feedback from members and are going to put out a stronger statement later, or looking for how to do things.
Yeah.
What's your perception from your colleagues and the people that you're talking to with regard to sort of any of the issues that we've talked about?
That's a good question. I want to make it very obvious at the beginning that I'm not speaking
Yeah,
for SVP here in any official capacity.
right.
But yeah, I've talked with some colleagues about this on the phone and over DMs and stuff like that on Blue Sky and email. And there was the SVP has been having these town halls, and I'll be having another one soon, where everybody can join a Zoom call and we can just talk about this. Um, I think shock is still kind of the primary. Shock and outrage are the two primary feelings here. Um, there's limited things that a group like SVP can really do from a legal standpoint right now, but and other people are really frustrated about that because they want to see swift, decisive action, and it's unclear to me how possible that really is at the moment. I do know that when we talk about something like this, when we talk about like prominent men showing up in the Epstein files, it's not isolated to just that. It brings up all of these other memories, feelings, scenarios, things that people have gone through in the past. And I think SVP's response to this and whatever we do as a paleontological community, in some way, is kind of going to be a referendum on how we've dealt with scandals like this in the past. Not just scandals, but like instances of abuse and harassment and misconduct. It all feels like it's kind of coming to a head here, and all of these feelings, the whispered networks and the rumors and people talking to each other, avoid this guy, watch out for him. All of this stuff is kind of coalescing right now, and it's kind of coming to a boiling point. And I really hope that we can move forward in a thoughtful direction after this. and that this will be a turning point, you know? It's something that I've never really had to think about that much as, like a white passing cis het male in paleontology, like a dude with a beard who like wears a sun helmet in the field. Like I I fit the bill for what a paleontologist should look like. And so this is one of these things that I've not really it would be easy for me to ignore this, I guess is what I'm saying. And I think I have a responsibility to talk about this sort of thing, and to whatever extent I have a megaphone or a platform that people listen to me, like I want to make sure that this sort of thing is being discussed, and that people who wouldn't normally think about speaking out have a platform and a megaphone to do that. I hope that SVP provides that as well to people. I hope that we're starting to see a change in a positive direction here. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I went all over the place.
Yeah, yeah, a bit. No, so my understanding of, it's a different domain. I don't understand the paleontological culture all that much. Most
Yeah.
of what I understand is through the stream, but I have also observed on social media platforms other paleontologists talking, and I remember, was it 2023 or maybe 2024 SVP? I think one of the initial opening talks, because I
Mm-hmm.
think Mary Lewis shared, former president of SVP, had
Yeah,
shared
yeah. Mm-hmm.
the things on
Margaret Lewis, yeah.
Blue Sky.
Yeah.
It was one of the opening talks was a paleontologist talking about the role that paleontology has played in systemic racism and colonialism and
Sure.
what that has
Yeah.
done in the field.
Mm-hmm.
And I interpreted that as an outsider, but whose domain also deals with similar things, as a positive about the direction paleontology is
We're trying
going
to
in,
reckon
that
with
there
that. Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
being front and center about this and not
Mm-hmm.
hiding from it. And maybe, again, I don't know, maybe this is naive from an outsider's perspective, but instances like that actually kind of fill me as an outsider with a little bit of optimism that maybe paleontology, or SVP specifically, can also kind of, lead the way in this domain as well, by confronting that too, and
Yeah.
being that way, and being forward. 'Cause I would hope every scientific discipline has an organization that can do likewise. The Society for Neuroscience or the American Psychological Association or anything like that. I would hope that
Mm-hmm.
every discipline has something like that. But I also know that that is naively optimistic. And instead, I do want to keep my eyes peeled across the scientific domain to see which communities are doing what and how they're doing it.
Yeah. I don't think it's
And
naive. I think it's perfectly fair to have that kind of an expectation, or at least a hope, and a push in that direction. And I don't know. I've been proud to hear some of my colleagues talk about this and how they really want to push hard for changes. Um, I think SVP absolutely has the potential to do that, and it's been interesting, like hearing perspectives from scientists outside of paleontology, like, oh yeah, our big professional organization, even though they have way more resources than SVP and they have full-time staff, it's like they they would be probably trying to ignore this. They've done stuff like that in the past. Paleontology, I like to think, has an okay reputation, and we do try and reckon with those sordid elements of the history of our science. If we're talking about people like Henry Fairfield Osborn, the guy who named Tyrannosaurus and Velociraptor, he was like a major eugenicist in the United States in the 1920s. He was like one of the really prominent people in that whole eugenics movement. He was a disgusting racist, and I, like I like to think that we don't shy away from that kind of thing as paleontologists. That we'll discuss this out in the open, and we should be ashamed of that past, but it's not something that we should shy away from talking about. That shame should be, I don't know, we should embrace that and move in a positive direction with it.
yeah, shame is a really powerful social emotion.
Right.
And we can actually harness that to learn and be better. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we did that as kids. We felt
Right.
ashamed when mom and dad came home and caught us with our hand in the cookie jar. We were embarrassed. Like, shame can serve pedagogical ends when we are
Yep.
dealing with these sorts of issues. And it sucks. Like I don't like feeling ashamed about all the things I've done over my life that I feel ashamed about, but like you should channel that into growing, and we can do that as institutions, as communities, as organizations, not just as individuals.
Hmm.
Because a lot of what I'm seeing in terms of the "I'm ashamed" responses from a lot of researchers is trying to do this reputation management type thing
Right.
about their association with Epstein, and a lot of these cloying like, "Oh, if I knew then what I know now," and I just get that I know that not every scientist is going to be how I described it, but most of the scientists I hear who go that route, it's like, yes, but you had every capacity to know
Right.
because you're a researcher, you know how to do research, and you're dealing with a very prominent individual with very deep pockets. Why did it never occur to you to do these simple searches and to do a little bit of research, that thing you're an expert in knowing how to do?
Hmm.
Um, there's a kind of strategic ignorance at play here. And I, being ashamed that you didn't know doesn't fly for me, when what you should be ashamed of is that you made the conscious choice not to know.
Right.
But now we can't deny that anymore. We can't
Hmm.
deny that Nathan, I can't pronounce his last name, had those associations with Epstein. I can't deny in the cognitive sciences that several people I've looked up to, people whose research I cite, are connected to the Epstein files and and they had every reason to know and suspect. And
Right.
eh, how do we navigate that from here? How do we, you know,
Right. And I,
I,
when we're talking about this, like, I did you see that thing on the this was shared with me by a colleague. The Daily Show had a segment on this whole thing with paleontology and the Epstein files. This is like a week or two ago. I'll send it to you.
oh
I was going to
yeah,
show it on stream, but it's pretty blue and it's humor. Like there's a lot of crass, crude humor in it, so I couldn't share it on stream. Family friendly
mhm,
broadcast. Um, but looking at that, I felt a certain degree of shame. It's like, is this what people are going to know fossil science for? And there's maybe a natural instinct to just try and ignore this or not address it, but I hope that people in the leadership of SVP, um, this is my personal view here, and that other people who are prominent in paleontology, people who are kind of movers and shakers in this field, they see this as an opportunity in order to actually improve things and like we we have a chance here to change things for the better, you know? Uh, like it's fertile ground for that right now. And we can do some cool stuff. We can let this be a real turning point. And I sincerely hope that that's what happens, you know? And to the extent that I can be part of that, I want to do that. Everybody deserves to feel welcome in this field. There are so many people who've been driven out of paleontology and many other sciences because of bad actors, because of harassment, because of abuse, because of misconduct. And the whole Epstein files thing just kind of lays this bare. Like it's impossible to ignore now. So let's solve this problem. It's not gonna be easy, but this is the time to do it. So let's jump on it. That's kind of my feeling right now.
no, yeah, and I guess maybe for some people in chat, there's a weirdness to talking about these types of issues with that kind of like strategic language of like this is the opportunity to do that, but this is ultimately how a lot of movements operate throughout time in history.
Yep.
Rights advocacy movements for all manner of minority groups that have made progress in industry, in government, in academia. They do have that mindset of what are the opportunities that we can latch onto to attract more people to our cause, to see our perspective, to
Right.
begin to agree with us, and to then be more amenable to the kinds of changes that we want to see in our domains, in our wherever we're trying to secure more rights for more people. um and not all of us who want to participate in these types of movements need to be leaders. Like,
Right.
not everybody can be a civil rights leader.
Yep.
Like, for
Not everybody
movements to
should
operate, we
be.
also
Some
need
people just
people to yeah, we
yeah.
also need people to participate in a following role, so that way,
Absolutely. Yeah.
what's the saying? Too many chefs spoil the stew or something like that.
Yeah.
We do need some organizational structure to this, and that's, you know, I'm I hope that I am okay saying this. Danny and I are not leaders here. We're
No.
not. Don't look to us to lead, but we can point people to leaders, people who have done a lot of the legwork already because they've been
Right.
arguing about these things for years or decades already, people
Hmm.
who've been trying to make waves. Um, and and if you want to get involved in any of these things, this can be an opportunity for more of the general public who's not already a part of the scientific community to participate in the scientific community. And
Absolutely.
we'll do our best to steer you to the people that are doing these types of things or are advocating for the types of things that we want. We'll definitely share our opinions for these kinds of things. um this is not something that the cloistered monks in the ivory tower should do alone, because
Right.
look at what we've done on our own already.
Yep.
We
That's what
need
got us into
your
this mess.
involvement. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. And I think
um
increasing
yeah.
transparency in science and like better communication to the public and like these are all parts of a solution here. These are all parts of how we move forward and actually improve things in the long run, bit by little bit. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really appreciate your time, Reiko. This is it's been an honor. Thank you for suggesting this. Holy cow, I'm glad it worked out. Uh,
I have not stopped talking about this for months. Like,
well, I'm sorry
really
to make you
since
rehash it, but it's
no, 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 no. 'Cause
really
the
appreciate
great
your
thing
input.
is every day I'm encountering more and more and more resources, more and more people who are talking about this, who are publishing about this,
Hmm.
um, who are, you know, um, adding their voice to it. Because, like you said, this is an opportunity, and I think a lot of people are jumping on this. And you had said earlier that you're having a lot of phone conversations, a lot of conversations with colleagues and things like that. I imagine a lot of us across a lot of domains in academia, in industry, in government, in the public arena are having a lot of these too. And let's signal boost as much as we can. The
Right.
links that you've shared, the stories that you've shared, and that all the other science communicators, because it's not just us on here doing it. It's also on YouTube. It's all the other science communicators across all these platforms who are talking about it. Let's keep signal boosting this and drawing more attention to this, because uh, that Scientific American article that I shared earlier ends with Steven Pinker lamely trying to argue that a lot of attention is being paid to his, photos and videos in connection with Epstein as a way to distract from Donald Trump's association with Jeffrey Epstein. And my response to that is, no, man, Epstein's connections to the scientific community are just as much a story as Epstein's connections to prominent politicians and businessmen. They're not.
Sure.
We don't have to hierarchically rank which one's worse. It's all bad.
Yeah.
Let's be pretty clear about that.
It's all
Um,
part of the same
yeah,
rotten tapestry there. It's
yeah.
yeah.
So let's keep talking about this
Yeah.
and keep the conversation going. But it's uncomfortable. You had started
Yeah.
this with the Spinosaurus paper, and very uncomfortable. I'm not. I'm never comfortable talking about these things. These are not comfortable topics. But
Right.
like I said in chat earlier, if scientists can't confront uncomfortable truths,
Hmm.
what's the point? Like,
Uh-huh.
this is something that we constantly tell people we're doing. Let's model being uncomfortable.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
what we do.
We have a certain degree of, not to be corny about it, but like we have a certain degree of privilege here. Like I can I can tank this, as the kids would
Yeah.
say. Like so let's do it.
Yeah.
Um thank you,
But
Reiko.
yeah, thank you for having me on. It was a spur
Yeah,
of the moment thing, but it's always great talking with you.
you too.
The disciplinary perspective you bring to these types of community issues is always a breath of fresh air for me, because I'm only exposed to it from my disciplinary perspective. So it's always great to
Same with me.
hear,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
from
nice to
you
get
about
that
this.
that different kind of viewpoint and it's kind of a sanity check in a way too. So thank you for providing that,
Yeah.
Reiko. I really appreciate
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And thank you, chat, for dealing with
Yeah, for sitting
my
through this. Yeah.
intrusion into the stream. I'll go back to being a silent moderator for the rest of stream.
Appreciate you, Reiko. I'm gonna wrap things up right after this, but
All right.
yeah.
Take it
And
easy, everyone.
everybody, Ricodactylus, thank you, thank you.